Have you ever noticed how everyone loves to talk about the most beautiful cities in the world? There are always rankings with the most charming destinations, the most incredible skylines, the most welcoming places. But what about the opposite? That's right, cities that are considered ugly. Then the conversation gets heated. Today, Bello Mundo is getting into this controversy and is going to show you 10 cities in the United States that keep appearing on forums, lists, and testimonials as the least pleasing cities to the eye. But first, two important things. First, this list is not the absolute truth, right? Not everyone thinks the same. The selection was made on the basis of reports, online polls, and reports from locals and visitors. It's a snapshot of what a lot of people say out there. Secondly, don't take it personally if your city's name appears here. Our aim is not to attack anyone, but to understand what leads these places to carry such a heavy reputation when it comes to urbanism, aesthetics, and visual quality. Because at the end of the day, every place has its value. But that doesn't stop us from taking a sincere look at reality, even when it's made up of cement, dangling wires, graffiti, abandonment, and almost no charm. Are you ready? Then let's go. Number 10. Camden, New Jersey. Opening our list full of controversy, here it comes. Camden, in the state of New Jersey. On paper, Camden looks promising. It's right next to Philadelphia, overlooks the Delaware River, and is in a region with a lot of history. But when you set foot in the city, it's a different story. For many years, Camden was one of the most dangerous cities in the United States. And that's no exaggeration. For decades, it topped the crime rankings, with rates so high that they even scared off neighboring residents. And the insecurity leaves visible marks. Abandoned houses, dilapidated buildings, and poorly maintained streets dominate much of the urban landscape. It's the kind of place where abandonment seems to have become routine. Graffitied facades, sidewalks covered in garbage, rubble in vacant lots. All this forms the portrait of a place that has fallen behind in terms of investment and infrastructure. Of course, there are exceptions. The Adventure Aquarium and the Battleship New Jersey are tourist attractions that try to save the city's image, bringing a bit of movement and history. But just walk a few blocks away from these islands and the contrast is striking. The poverty is stark, the neglect even more so. Camden is even trying to fight back. There are revitalization projects springing up, partnerships with private companies, renovations in some public areas. But the truth is that decades of neglect don't go away overnight. Number 9. Bakersfield, California. When people talk about California, the image that usually comes to mind is the classic one of the beach, palm trees, surfers, and the golden sun of romantic comedies. But the truth is that not every corner of the state follows this cinematic script, and Bakersfield is living proof of this. Located in the central part of California, within the San Joaquin Valley, Bakersfield has an identity much more linked to oil and heavy agriculture than to any postcard landscape. And it is precisely this industrial setting that has earned the city a less than glamorous reputation. Growth has been rapid, and urban planning hasn't kept pace. The result? A landscape filled with concrete blocks, wide avenues that look like they're straight out of a logistics center, and architecture that borders on functional and dull. It doesn't have the charming feel of a historic city, nor the modern appeal of the big metropolises. Visually, it's an urban patchwork quilt with little flair. What's more, the air there isn't the best. Really. The combination of emissions from the oil industry, dust from agricultural activities, and heavy truck traffic makes Bakersfield one of the most polluted cities in California. On hot days, when the air seems trapped over the valley, it feels like being in an oven. only full of smoke. Number 8. Cleveland, Ohio. On the shores of Lake Erie, Cleveland was once a giant, an industrial powerhouse that drove the growth of the United States, but which also ended up hostage to its own past. For a long time, Cleveland was synonymous with factories, mass production, and rampant pollution. And the weight of this heritage still shows in the urban landscape. Many neighborhoods retain that air of a city in transition, with abandoned warehouses, old industrial structures, and a general aesthetic that screams gray. The climate doesn't help either. The winters are long, cold, and make everything look a bit sad. And to top it all off, the Cuyahoga River, which runs through the city, became famous for a surreal reason. It literally caught fire in the middle of the 20th century. That's right, because of the absurd level of pollution with oil and industrial waste in the water. A spark was enough to turn the river into a floating torch. This episode became a symbol of environmental degradation in the United States. In recent years, Cleveland has made quite a comeback. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame area is modern and attractive. Downtown has gained interesting cultural venues, and the lake has become more of a leisure area. But even so, the overall image remains divided. Much of the city has the look of a place that once was and is now trying to find itself. It's a mixture of abandoned structures, graffiti, urban voids, and a rather cold atmosphere, especially if you're passing through from the outside without knowing the soul of the place. And there is a soul. Cleveland has incredible museums, one of the best symphony orchestras in the country, and an intense sports scene, with passionate fans of the Browns, Cavaliers, and Guardians, even in the worst of times. Visually, it may not be an eye-catcher, but those who live there will tell you that, with a little time, Cleveland wins you over. Perhaps not because of its beauty, but because of its strong, authentic, and historic identity. Number 7. Newark, New Jersey. Leaving Bakersfield and Cleveland, we return to New Jersey, now to talk about Newark, the state's largest city. Close to New York, Newark is almost an extension of the Big Apple, but without the fame, charm, or tourist infrastructure of its wealthy neighbor. And perhaps that's why it appears on so many lists as one of the least attractive cities in the United States. What weighs against Newark? A lot of things. To begin with, its reputation is linked to violence. For many years, the city led the state in crime statistics, which has created a stigma that is difficult to erase. Even with advances in public safety, there are areas that still generate fear, especially at night. And this feeling is exacerbated by the urban setting of the center. Old, poorly maintained buildings, graffitied walls, broken sidewalks, and a general aesthetic that is more reminiscent of abandonment than revitalization. Another critical point: noise and visual pollution. Newark is crisscrossed by giant highways, has a busy industrial port, and is home to Newark International Airport, one of the busiest on the East Coast. Planes taking off all the time, heavy traffic, trucks passing by, honking horns everywhere. All this forms a combo of urban chaos that doesn't help the city's image at all. On the other hand, the city has a strong cultural scene and a rich gastronomy that reflects the mix of local cultures. Portuguese, Brazilian, Caribbean, African, and Latin American communities add a special flavor to the city's streets. In other words, Newark has life. It has hard-working people, good food, music, art, and an intense multicultural vibe. But visually, it still leaves something to be desired. The urban aesthetic remains heavy, and the legacy of decades of neglect appears on every corner. Number 6. Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is a city that pulses with music on every corner. It's the birthplace of blues, rock and roll, and soul music. It's where Elvis Presley lived, where B.B. King shone, and where Southern cuisine makes you want to eat your heart out. Culturally, Memphis is huge, but visually, things take a different turn. Many people who visit the city are disappointed by the general state of the urban landscape. Bumpy streets, poorly maintained sidewalks, aging houses, some of which are literally falling apart, are all part of the scene, especially outside the downtown area. And this contrast is disturbing because expectations are high for a place with so much history. Apart from the famous Beale Street, where the blues bars and concert halls are, the rest of the city seems abandoned. Memphis has grown fast, but without much discretion, and this has led to gigantic neighborhoods, distant from each other with little structure and a very unkempt appearance. Another issue is social inequality. Poverty in Memphis is visible, and this reality has a direct impact on the aesthetics of the city. Many areas are precarious, with simple housing and poor infrastructure. Crime is also a serious issue, especially in areas off the tourist radar, where the feeling of insecurity drives even the locals away. Number 5. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore has its postcards, the Inner Harbor with its famous aquarium, and charming neighborhoods like Fells Point and Federal Hill, full of colorful houses, historic bars, and sea views. But you only have to get out of this tourist bubble to understand why the city makes so many lists of ugly places. Baltimore's biggest problem is urban abandonment. You only have to walk through neighborhoods further away from downtown to come across rows of row houses, many of them in ruins. Broken windows, graffitied walls, boarded-up doors. In several blocks, the impression is of being in a post-apocalyptic movie set. What's more, the city has been facing a crime crisis for years. The homicide rate is often among the highest in the United States, and this, of course, influences the general perception of insecurity and neglect. Baltimore was once an industrial and port hub, but with the economic decline, much has been left behind. Abandoned warehouses, disused factories, worn-out infrastructure. In some cases, these spaces have become stylish lofts and cultural centers, bringing a certain alternative air to parts of the city. But in many others, abandonment remains the picture. Number 4. Stockton, California. Another California representative on our list, Stockton is located in the central region of the state, very close to the San Joaquin River Delta. And although it has a port that connects the city to the ocean, Stockton is far from a picture postcard. The city faced one of the most severe economic crises in the country, even declaring municipal bankruptcy in the year 2012. And the damage was not small. The financial collapse left deep scars on the urban landscape. Many commercial buildings were abandoned, the city center emptied, and several areas resembled a real ghost town. With less money circulating, public services also suffered. Parks were left unmaintained, lampposts were out, squares were abandoned, and there was a feeling of abandonment. Crime has increased, air quality has worsened due to the proximity to busy highways and intense agricultural activities, and all this has contributed to building an image of decay. Another problem cited by those who live in or visit Stockton is the lack of visual identity. The neighborhoods seem to have been built without much planning, with generic houses and almost no well-kept green areas. The result? A large, sprawling city that doesn't charm either in terms of structure or aesthetics. Of course, there are exceptions. Some local events highlight the products of the agricultural region, and there are revitalization projects trying to bring life back to the center. But so far, Stockton is still seen by many people as one of the least beautiful and least welcoming places in Golden, California. Number 3. St. Louis, Missouri. In third place, we come to St. Louis, a city marked by the immense Gateway Arch, the famous Silver Arch that has become a symbol of the American Midwest. From afar, the landscape is impressive, but you only have to walk a few blocks off the tourist trail to realize that the postcard doesn't tell the whole story. St. Louis suffers from a chronic problem of urban abandonment. Much of the city seems forgotten in time. Old Victorian houses that could be beautiful are in ruins, with collapsing roofs and windows covered with wood. In some areas, there is a constant feeling of insecurity, fueled by a high crime rate that has a direct impact on the perception of visitors. The city's commercial center is also emptying out. Many companies have moved out, buildings are empty, and, apart from on the days of the sporting event, entire blocks are practically deserted. And as everyone knows, a city without movement, without life in the streets, tends to look even more decadent in the eyes of passers-by. Number 2. Gary, Indiana. Taking second place on the podium, if there's one city that's mentioned on almost every list of the ugliest or saddest in the United States, it's Gary, in the state of Indiana. Located near Chicago, right on the shores of Lake Michigan, Gary had its heyday in the last century, and then went into a collapse that seems to have no end. The city was born as a steel hub. It was planned by U.S. Steel, and for decades prospered thanks to steel. But when the industry went into crisis, Gary lost jobs, population, and hope, all at the same time. The result is a landscape marked by disused factories, abandoned schools, closed public buildings, and entire neighborhoods adrift. On some blocks, walking down the street is like walking through a post-apocalyptic city. Time seems to have frozen there around the 70s. Crumbling roofs, broken sidewalks, high weeds, and a structural sadness that seems to have seeped into the bricks. Crime increased, revenue plummeted, and public services collapsed. For many years, Gary was a symbol of urban failure, with poorly lit streets, dilapidated schools, and few prospects for young people. The pollution of the industrial past still leaves its mark, even after improvements in recent decades. Curiously, Gary is also the birthplace of Michael Jackson. The house where he was born has become a modest tourist attraction. But apart from that, the city still has a lot of catching up to do. There are small revitalization efforts underway, but they come up against a history of abandonment that is difficult to erase. Number 1. Detroit, Michigan. And finally, we come to the gold medalist, the city that almost always tops the rankings when it comes to urban decay in the United States. Detroit. Known worldwide as the cradle of the automotive industry, home to Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, Detroit lived through a golden age in the 20th century. It was synonymous with innovation, jobs, culture, and prosperity. But all that shine wore off over time. What followed was a vertiginous decline. Municipal bankruptcy, mass unemployment, population loss, and an urban landscape that, in many neighborhoods, looks more like a ghost town. The scene is sad. Abandoned houses, some consumed by arson, others simply collapsing over time. Many streets are empty, with destroyed buildings and vacant lots where whole families once lived. The city center is even trying to react. There, cafes, galleries, cultural spaces, and renovated residential towers are springing up. But outside this little revitalized bubble, the scene is still one of structural abandonment. Public transport is insufficient, road maintenance is poor, and the size of the city makes it difficult to guarantee quality of life for those who live far from the center. Those who don't have a car often face real daily odysseys to get to work or to find basic services. Today, many residents are dedicated to rebuilding their communities with urban gardens, street art, and local initiatives. Some say that Detroit is only anticipating the future of big cities, decentralized with an alternative economy and community solutions. But for now, what still stands out is the image of decay. And for this reason, with a mixture of sadness, history, and hope, Detroit holds the title of the ugliest city in the United States, at least in the eyes of the urban rankings. And that concludes our controversial list of the 10 ugliest cities in the United States. But now we want to hear from you. Do you agree with the ranking? Do you think it's unfair to any of these cities? Do you have travel experience or live in one of these places and think differently? Let us know in the comments, and we'll exchange ideas. If you liked this content, don't forget to like, share, and follow Bello Mundo, because we love exploring all sides of the world, from the most beautiful to the most questionable. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you next time.